Mariska, what are some of the foods that are high in salt? I guess for South Africans, some of our staple stuff is also very high in salt. Do you want to just tell us about some of those?
Absolutely. If you look at your breads, bread is a staple still for a large part of our population. And so bread is one of the culprits of high salt intake. Your processed meats, your salamis and your hams and bacon, etc. Then cheese. We often forget that cheese is high in salt content as well. And your snacks, your salty nuts and crisps and other salty snacks like your olives, etc., etc. Those contain high salt already, and it is just important to take note of that. Read the food labels, learn to read your food labels to identify foods that are lower in salt, and maybe use that in combination in a meal to try to reduce your salt intake.
Speaking of food labels, often we look at the sodium levels. Now, how do you do the conversion?
Sodium, if the food lists sodium instead of salt on the food label, an easy conversion is just to multiply the sodium by 2.5 to give you an indication of what the salt content is. And then a rule of thumb to know when a food actually contains high salt in the ingredients, it's important to just look for salt content of less than 0.3 grams. That is usually classified as low, and anything higher than 1.5 is classified as high salt content. So that gives you good indication where the food that you would buy or eat or choose to eat would fall, and to make then a decision as to what you're going to add to that food. Don't add extra salt for one, and then also look at other parts of your meal that would probably use or possibly use less salt in order for you to reduce the salt intake for that specific meal.
Now, it's obviously different for adults and children and their sort of dietary habits. What is the recommended daily allowance for adults and for children?
Very important. World Health Organization for adults recommend less than 5 grams of salt a day, and then your children between the ages of 1 and 2 years, their recommended intake is about 0.3 grams, and then 0.4 grams just for between 3 years and about 10, 11, and then from then on they go on to the recommended adult usage, which is less than 5 grams. But important to try to find those salt alternatives and try to reduce the salt intake as much as possible.
Okay, and Mariska, finally, you guys have made several resources available to the public. Tell us a bit more about Cooking from the Heart.
Nick, Cooking from the Heart is an initiative that Pharmacodynamics started about 3 years ago with the Heart and Stroke Foundation. And the aim of these recipe books were to make people aware of how easy it is to make healthier lifestyle choices and to give people options, because often you want to make those changes, you simply just don't know how to. So it's a very valuable set of recipe books that are resources that teach you how to read your food labels. It teaches you how to prepare your food just slightly different so that it is healthier and more heart friendly. And then of course it contains delicious recipes that has been approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation dietitians, and it uses low salt, low sugar, and then low fat as well. So it's heart friendly. It complies with the Heart and Stroke Foundation guidelines with regards to dietary guidelines. And important is that these recipe books are available free of charge to the public. So they are all available online at cookingfromtheheart.co.za, fully downloadable, or you can simply access all the various different recipes on the website.
Sorry, just one more thing. You did say earlier that South Africa has actually passed legislation which does make us stand out from the rest in terms of salt levels on food. You want to tell us about that?
Absolutely, yes. South Africa was actually the first country that legislated salt content in especially your processed foods. And they've rolled out an action plan over the next 5 to 6 years to get the food manufacturers to comply to reducing the salt content gradually. If they just would legislate a certain salt level and just reduce it according to the global guidelines, a food will definitely taste quite bland. So they've implemented just a step down approach after how these food manufacturers should comply over the next 5 years. The first set of guidelines are set for this June 2016, where the food manufacturers have to adhere to specific to the first level of reduction of their salt content, and that's very important, especially for your bread manufacturers, because of bread being such a staple for a huge part of our population still.